Resident Evil Survivor 2 is a game that has left me questioning almost every single aspect of it. From what little we know about its development history to the actual gameplay itself, there just seems to be so many strange choices made, which ultimately led to this game's reputation as arguably the worst game in the franchise. Yes, even worse than the last one, if you can believe it. Originally announced as Resident Evil Firezone, the game was created after a deal Capcom had with Namco to create an arcade tie-in for the series. Not long after its initial reveal, the game was officially rebranded as Resident Evil Survivor 2 Code Veronica. There would also be a PS2 port released in Japan and Europe, with the Americans missing out on this one, possibly from the negative reception they gave the first one. After finally picking up this game for myself, I wanted to see what all the fuss was about. At this point, I've played almost every game from this franchise, so I'm really having to dig towards the bottom of the barrel to find something different.
Resident Evil.
To put it simply, the game is an arcade version of Code Veronica. The story is super condensed, and it's really just an excuse to reuse CV's assets instead of having to come up with an original scenario. Basically, Claire and Steve have to escape Rockford Island, and later on in one of the game's files, it's revealed that this whole thing was just a nightmare Claire had, so who really cares? Well, turns out not even the developers, because there's absolutely no voice acting anywhere in the game. There's usually like 2 lines of written dialogue in each cutscene, and that's it. Straight into the action. For this playthrough, I'm gonna go with the fan favorite Steve.
Okay.
Wait, what?
Okay.
Oh. Well, I guess there is some voiceover after all. Each stage follows the same goal of collecting one or more keys to open the door to the boss fight. Along the way, you can collect unique weapons for each character. Both have unlimited pistol ammo and can use the shotgun, but Steve can pick up the SMGs and a grenade launcher, while Claire gets to carry a Magnum and an AK-47. Basically, grab the key, grab the weapons, and try doing it as quick as possible to avoid Nemesis showing up. Yes, you heard that correctly, Nemesis shows up. Admittedly, it is a cool feature in theory for an arcade game like this. You're still up against the clock like a lot of arcade games from that era, but the timer hitting 0 doesn't immediately equal a game over. Rather, it unleashes the creature that might give you one. As cool as the idea is of Nemesis showing up as you're desperately trying to escape signs, he completely falls flat in posing any kind of real threat. You thought RE3 Remake had a disappointing Nemesis? Nah, they already ruined him way earlier. Once he enters the same area, instead of full on sprinting towards you or carrying a rocket launcher, he just slowly walks about. He can't grab you from a distance or do any kind of unique attack, so avoiding him takes just as much effort as a regular zombie. I actually had to replay the first level and let him hit me just to see what happens. Basically, he one hit kills you and then despawns. It's honestly kind of sad. There's no point shooting at him since he doesn't drop any special items, so you hardly have to pay him any attention. Also, he only has this one audio clip. You'll constantly hear it every time he enters the room, to the point where it becomes laughable, especially since we know his iconic voice, Stars. Except they couldn't really use that because it would highlight that Nemesis chasing down Claire and Steve doesn't make any sense because they aren't Stars members. I don't know. On a more positive note, the game has pretty solid controls. There's 6 different button layouts, including more modern day control schemes like the typical R1 to shoot with the dual analog sticks for moving and aiming. By default, the game has the left stick for moving, X to shoot, and the shoulder buttons are used to turn left and right. You might think that sounds crazy, but to be fair, they worked perfectly fine. You can still move, turn the camera, and shoot all at once with a natural grip on the controller. With this being an arcade game, it's purposefully designed to be tough, but thankfully there's 5 difficulty options from very easy right up to very hard. I decided to drop down from normal to easy and still just about managed to beat the game on my last continue. With only 5 stages, my entire playthrough of the story mode clocked in at a staggering 40 minutes. That's including time spent mucking around in the menus as well as waiting on loading screens. Yeah, the most frustrating part of this game for me was how long it takes to load between each room. Okay, so every every Resident Evil had door transitions to mask the loading screens, which is fine, but in Survivor 2 they take even longer than usual. So after the door animation, you'll always see this bland white text which stays on screen for an average of about 5 seconds. I know it sounds petty, but add those 5 seconds up every time you go through a door, and it just makes traversing through the stage such a slog for what's supposed to be a fast-paced action arcade game. What's worse is that the countdown for Nemesis doesn't pause during loading screens, which really puts a spotlight on how long they take. Here for example, I go through the door with 13 seconds left until Nemesis appears. By the time I get through, it immediately hits 0, which then pauses the game again just to load a 10-second cutscene, and after that it has to load again. Yeah, it's kind of ridiculous. Other notable things to quickly point out, enemy variety is your typical Resident Evil cast of zombies, dogs, lickers, and these stretchy arm guys who I can't remember their names. Boss fights are pretty stale and all take place in a big open flat room where you just strafe around and shoot. You don't have to learn their attack patterns like in the older games, since you can freely move while shooting. Plus the unlimited ammo takes away any incentive to choose your shots carefully. Another big positive for this game though is that it actually makes Steve kinda badass this time. Mainly because he doesn't speak.
What's wrong, Steve? Shoot him!
Wait! I can't! Father!
To be fair, the PS2 port isn't just the short arcade game. There's a couple extra game modes thrown in, like the dungeon mode, which has a little bit more of that Resident Evil DNA. Before each mission, you have to choose your loadout, and this time you have limited ammo on everything including the pistol. The goal is to kill the boss at the end, but now there's multiple different paths to take and no map to guide you. There's also limited space in your inventory, so you have to choose carefully what guns you want to pick up along the way. I mean, it's not the most in-depth survival mode, and ammo is still hardly an issue, but it's worth praise for being something extra to do after finishing the main arcade game. The other thing that's randomly included is Roach mode, and it's precisely what it sounds like. You spawn in a room and shoot all the roaches. It's not even hard because like the game has aim assist, so just why? Overall, I think the best word to sum up the entire game is cheap. But that isn't exactly true either, because what I paid for this game definitely wasn't cheap, I'll tell you that much. It's probably the weirdest game in the franchise in terms of presentation, at least up until RE-verse, I guess. But yeah, I wouldn't recommend tracking this one down, as it sure as hell isn't one of those rare underrated PS2 gems, unless you want to play it out of sheer curiosity. And with that being said, thanks for watching. Bye guys.